still speak up. And be aware that there's always gonna be a camera on you.
All right, hi, everybody. I'm Andrea Gordy. I'm the chairperson of Community Board 3. We sponsored this conversation on the future of our waterfront this evening. I'm joined by Susan Stetzer, our district manager, and I'll say a few words and then maybe we can talk, like, since there's just so few of us, we can introduce ourselves. But we decided to convene this meeting thanks to our Parks Committee members and also, I mean, Meltzer, Community Board One chair member, board member, who kind of had the foresight to consider, welcome, to consider starting a conversation, noting that this would not be the first conversation or the last one, regarding the stewardship of the changing nature of the waterfront on the east side of Manhattan. And particularly in light of the new piers that are opening here and the East Coastal Resiliency Plan. And we had this idea because we understand that stewarding our parks can present a number of challenges. The Parks Department doesn't have 1% of the city budget yet. They're chronically underfunded. There's plenty of ideas and assets on the table regarding how to steward it, right? We'll have concessions for the first time in the East River. Hi, welcome everybody. Thank you for coming. We'll take this opportunity also to look at other stewardship models, what might work for us, what might not. And noting the very kind of unique assets our neighborhood has. We already have quite a bit of stewardship groups, the LES Ecology Center, many friends of groups, East River Allies. Many of you here are very well familiar with all of them, are part of them. But we thought we would open this conversation as an opportunity to think about how we might work together as a coalition and just experiment with different models of stewardship before the whole park reopens next year. Knock on wood. So yeah, so that, like I said, you know, we'll start with a presentation that Trevor is going to lead. Explaining a little bit more about what I'm discussing, and then we'll open it back up for conversation, which I'll facilitate. So does everyone want to just say who they are and their affiliation?
Sure. Susan Stetzer, District 3, Community Board 3 District Manager. Thank you.
This is Victoria Negron. I'm Tanya Castro Negron. I'm the resident leader of Manson 2, just across the street. I've been there for 45 years.
All right, I'm Michael Kramer. I live in Ward 3, and I'm the president of the South Street Seaport Coalition and a public member of Community Board 1.
And I'm Laura Sewell. I'm the director of the East Village Community Coalition, and I'm primarily serving here to help facilitate presentations and communication.
Hey Webster, I'm the president of the Sarah Bell Park Community Coalition. I'm also on the CB3 Parks Committee, but I'm really here just to listen.
I'm Diane Lake. I'm here as a member of the CB3 Parks Committee.
I'm Tisha Fields. I'm CB3 neighborhood.
I'm Daniel Tano. I'm on the Community Board 3, the Parks and Waterfront Committee. I'm also, I used to work at the Lower East Side Ecology Center, and I worked on a lot of waterfront projects and stewardship and yeah, things like that. I also work for the Parks Department, but that's not what I'm not representing them at all today here.
So I'm Tammy Meltzer. I'm chair Manhattan Community Board 1, just to the south. I'm here to help run the tech tonight and listen.
I'm Charlotte. I'm interning CB1 this summer.
And my name is Trevor Holland. I'm the chair of Parks and Waterfront for Community Board 3. I also live in this building, which is right along the waterfront, and I wear a bunch of other hats. But for the purposes of this meeting, I'm going to represent Community Board 3, Parks. And we have one additional person. If you want to introduce yourself.
Hi, my name's Ardadna. I'm also on CB3. I'm on the land use committee.
So I just want to give one tech reminder. The owls that are in the center of the table have white eyes. That tells you that it's looking at you. It will move for whoever is speaking to highlight on camera. And they are very sensitive mice. So if I lean over and whisper to Charlotte, it ends up on YouTube forever. So it's just a friendly reminder. We try and do some housekeeping and tell people if you'd like it to live in infamy, please say it.
All right, thank you for that tech highlight and also for that great introduction from our board chair. But I want to emphasize, this is just a conversation. We've had many conversations, many of the residents around here had many conversations about stewarding the waterfront in different formats. We want to see if we can come up with some ideas and just listen to see if this can happen. And this isn't the beginning or the end of outreach or talking to people. This is actually just the beginning. And I think it's crucial to note that because we're not going to get everybody in one meeting. There'll be more meetings. It's very, very preliminary discussions about how we can help take care of our water. So, you know, why are we here? Why are we here this evening to talk about this, you know, in particular, stewarding our waterfront? There are billions of dollars that have been earmarked for our side. The east side and down through the Battery Park. But it's crucial that these investments are unified. And right now we do not have unification for these plans. It's sort of piecemeal put together based on funding, different government agencies. They all tie in together in their own way, but they're all separate projects. Just if you look at the map, and I know it's a little difficult to see, the projector decided to kick its not work, so we're working with a small projector. We have the East Side Coastal Resiliency area, also known as ESCR. Right outside the window is Brooklyn Bridge Montgomery Coastal Resilience, also known as BMCR. We have the Seaport Coastal Resilience as SPCR, another coastal resiliency plan. I think, correct me if I'm wrong, they've begun construction on that. I'm not sure what happened to the Brooklyn Bridge Esplanade project, but that was also part of the discussion of coastal resiliency. And you have the Financial District and Seaport Climate Master Plan, Climate Resilience Master Plan, which is in, I'd say, the planning stages at this point, which covers a much larger area in the Pine District. And then a series of Battery Park and Battery Coastal Resiliency projects along Lower and going up further. There were other plans from anything from U.S. Corps of Engineers to more Battery Park type plans. But primarily, we're here to talk about this particular area to see if we can work together and come up with some type of stewardship plan. Next one. Even we're sitting basically where the purple buildings are on the graph. And as you can see, there is a multitude of many different agencies and federal agencies, city and state agencies, which sort of all have their hand in this particular area. It's CB1, CB3, EDC, DEC, DEP, the whole list of acronyms, they're all involved in this one particular area in terms of planning. That makes it very difficult to get coordination. It makes it very difficult for us as a community to say what we'd like to see on the waterfront, because we don't have any control over what is planned here other than input, but we'd like to see if we can have or get more input into the design and future plans and maintenance for this particular area. Excellent. As I mentioned before, each entity has its own budget, has its own set of plans, has its own way it figures out what should go in what area. And that leads to a lot of gaps in planning. A lot of different areas have different things. And to some extent, it leads to inequality in terms of amenities. And also, there's different timelines for each particular project. And feel free to jump in if I'm missing something, because this is just a conversation and I want to keep it that way. But go ahead. All resiliency projects well, most of them might be complete over the next decade, but the question is, who's gonna manage and who's gonna maintain these new assets for the city? Would it make sense for our individual waterfront stewardship group and advocacy groups to join together as one, as opposed to having different groups, different places, trying to figure out the best way to steward the area? I just want to welcome person, if you want to have a quick introduction. We just started, we're going over some of the slides of this presentation, but you can introduce yourself.
Sorry, I'm late. My name is Christina Datz Romero from the Lower East Side Ecology Center.
What we believe is that together with all the groups that are around our particular area, but if we unify and we become stakeholders in this particular group, we can promote, a vibrant, inclusive, and sustainable urban environment. If you want to take over, Diane, I know Diane's going to give a portion of this presentation. If you want to start here.
Sure. So, as Andrea and Trevor have said, we have a lot of stakeholders in this area from the community. We have friends of organizations, we have the Lower East Side Ecology Center, we have other groups that are interested in advocacy for the waterfront. And so I'm thinking that these groups will continue to operate. It's not that these groups will go away. There are going to be plenty of times when any individual group will be the best decision makers and advocates for the space that they're involved with. Pier 42, East River Park, the Esplanade, they're all different, lots of detail there that a group could handle. But also that means that when we have all these groups, everybody's kind of standing alone. And so this might be a good opportunity to not only form our own organizations or continue with our own organizations, but to come together with some solidarity and create a more unified presence on the waterfront between CB3 and CB1, so that together we have a lot more influence and a lot more say in what happens. It's very easy for each one of these individual agencies to do their thing on their own timeline with their own budget. And if they're only talking to a few people at a time, it's a bunch of isolated conversations. But together, we might be able to have a broader conversation with a lot more influence and a lot more unified community voice behind it. So, Trevor, I know that you and other people in this room have engaged in these conversations before over the years. CB3 cares very much about the waterfront and what becomes of it. And now we've also, been talking to CB1 about how we might work together to take the space from roughly 14th Street down, sort of around near the Battery, and join forces and say, what should this look like for the communities that live here and use these spaces? We're going to be handed off these brand new spaces. They'll need maintenance. They will undoubtedly need enhancements. It's not really possible for them to do everything that we want to have done. There will be many, many, many open issues when these spaces open. As Andrea pointed out, the parks budget is being cut, not enhanced. And so there's an opportunity here for us to come together and say, okay, what do we want? What do the people who live here want? What could this look like? And how could we work together to make that happen? Second, again, hello.
Thank you. Sorry, I'm late.
That's okay.
Frank, we're just having a conversation, so if you would introduce yourself.
Sure, I'm Frank Avila Goldman. I'm a resident of Ubinger Gardens. It's affordable housing a couple of blocks down. We're on the waterfront. Sorry, I was rushing here. Chair of Friends of Pier 42. Involved in a lot of other community groups, including the CAG. I'm just here for the conversation. Thank you.
And so where we are, Frank, is Trevor and I have been walking through just, what started this conversation, the many different resiliency projects and enhancement projects that are happening up and down the waterfront. The fact that Community Board One is also undergoing the same kind of work. And we've just kind of gotten to the question, the big idea is, should we explore working together? All of our own individual groups who are going to steward spaces that mean something to us, but then also joining forces to represent the entire East River waterfront. And what would that look like? So, we have taken a look at how some other communities have done this, particularly when there's a big space to manage. We're just going to take a look now at some examples from around the city. The Bronx River Alliance, I think some of you guys are familiar with the work they've done. There's also the Trust for Governor's Island, Hudson River Park, Brooklyn Bridge Park, and the Red Hook Conservancy. They're all a little bit different. So these are just examples that we might want to talk about and understand, how they've done it. And this might be something that, people are interested in continuing this conversation. We could ask them to come and talk with us or meet with us and understand, a little bit more about how they've done what they've done. So for the Bronx River Alliance, that's a nonprofit organization. It is focused on the Bronx River. It's the one of the original models for coalition stewardship, where different organizations and stakeholders, not necessarily just park people, but other kinds of stakeholders as well, come together. They are led by a board of directors, and the members on that board of directors represent local communities and the interests of the local communities. And nonprofit organizations, educational institutions, government agencies, business. It's a mix of stakeholders. And they are, you can go to the next slide, Tammy. Thank you. They are very focused on community engagement. So they do community events and programs. They have lots of volunteer opportunities. They partner with local organizations, and they have public meetings and forums. They have arrangements with the Parks Department. I think there are probably people in this room and on this conversation who know more about that than I do. So I won't go into detail about that, but that's one model, is just, kind of just get all the interested groups, advocates, friends of, together and create an organization where this can be discussed. How do we, what do we do? There might be people here who know more about Trust for Governor's Island than I do. Anybody wanna? Go ahead.
So the Trust for Governor's Island was set up very differently because it was a full, started pre-development. I'll just put it that way. So the mayor appoints 8 directors as well as 5 others. One must be a local resident. And then others are nominated by the assembly member, the state senator, the chair of the local community board, and the governor. The mayor has no direct say on what happens for the governance of Governor's Island, except for the fact that they do all the appointments. And so all the appointments change with all the electeds. So that's something to know. The directors serve a 3-year term. They get no compensation, and they have 3 regular meetings and 1 annual. Decisions are made by a majority vote. There is also a cab that they have that's set up. But I would tend to say that everything happens at the corporation level and then advised to the cab. Sometimes it's the other way around, but it's a far more governmentally heavy body than others in your presentation. But it's beautiful, come visit.
So Hudson River Park Trust has yet a somewhat different model. It's a partnership between the state of New York and the city of New York. I think there are plenty of people in our community who were involved in this at one point or another. At least advocating for it, working toward it, helping to get it set up. But because it's a partnership, some members are appointed by the governor of New York. Some members are appointed by the mayor of New York City. And then there are additional members nominated by local officials from the areas that are adjacent to the Hudson River Park. So this model is intended to ensure that both the state and the city's interests in the area are represented. It's a public benefit corporation, so that's different from the nonprofit, community-based organization that, say, the Bronx River Alliance has. But it is a type of corporation that is meant to serve the public good. And so it's one model for trying to organize something on a large scale.
I would add that there's also an advisory board that's involved with Hudson River Park, 50 members, rotating between the 3 different community boards, 1, 2, and 4, chairs the chair. Those 50 members are basically all the constituent groups, all the friends of, all the people who have interest in starting ships, maritime interests.
Also the NYCHA housing.
NYCHA, of course. So it's a pretty representative group of 50 members that changes from time to time. And whatever issues are in front of that board, first are at the advisory council. And so it's a pretty effective mechanism. I was the chair of the first advisory council.
They also have a Friends of group that does a fundraising arm that helps fund the trust for maintenance, volunteers, programming, and other things. So it's a variety of different types of funding mechanisms that they have, obviously state and city. And the interesting thing about Hudson River Park Trust is there are parts of it that they manage everything around it, AKA the cruise ship piers, but they don't manage the piers, right? That's done through separate organizations. Or if you look at EDC owns, many of the different piers and things that are in that area. So there is a way that I think that could be done on any coastline that acknowledges the prior ownership and engagement of city agencies while not having them necessarily run the whole show.
Okay, thank you. Brooklyn Bridge Park. So that was established in 2010. The mayor appoints directors. Some of them are elected officials and city commissioners. Only 2 are community representatives. And then there's an advisory council. And that's how the community gives their feedback to the Brooklyn Bridge Park Corporation. There are 35 members on that advisory council, and they represent the local community. And again, it's, all different interests, not just friends of groups, but all different interests that might have something that they want to say or do about Brooklyn Bridge Park. Each neighborhood community organization nominates a delegate, and then there are members at large. All those members have to be approved by the board of directors. So there is a vetting process that goes on there, but this is a slightly different model for having some governance and yet having a lot of community representation at the same time. And then finally, the Red Hook Conservancy. So that is, now we're back to the nonprofit organization model. They were friends of Red Hook Recreation Center, but they have grown since then. And now they work toward conserving, protecting, and advocating for 16 parks and open and recreational spaces in Red Hook. So they're covering the Red Hook area and not just focusing on one part of Red Hook, as even though they originated as just having a strong interest in the recreation center. They they are very focused, as you might imagine, on volunteering, on programming, on community involvement, and conserving and enhancing local parks and recreational spaces. So those are some of the, models that, people have suggested, something to look at, something that's been successful in other parts of the city. Obviously, not every community has the same needs and values, so some of these models might, be worth discussing for us or others not, but this is a conversation. So at this point, I'm going to stop talking and turn it back over to Andrea, who's going to help us moderate the conversation about reactions and thoughts.
I think there's one more slide.
Uh,
Yeah, there should be. Was a few more
The
slides.
timeline.
Oh, okay.
All the timeline shows is that, we're talking about something, the immediate short run, anywhere from next month to 5 years. But we could also be talking about things that take 10 years and things that take 35 years. So there's a lot going on.
And this is just for one piece of it, right? So as we were talking about earlier, every piece of the coastline from, 23rd Street on down has its own timeline, its own budget, its own schedule, and it's in a different place with different set of needs. So it's definitely a challenge. And this is what it would look like for something that is very large and spread over a long period of time. So.
Just want to point out, even though everybody has their own timelines,
We have to talk about it.
the only people who don't have our own timelines are us in the community. We're here, we live here. We are here, some of us before, some of us moved in during, and for the people who will be, growing up and living here in the future, we are the connectivity for every one of these projects, and that's not lost on me.
And I'll just add that this, whatever happens is going to take time. And the entire coastline is under some sort of construction. Pier 35, Pier 36, Pier 42, East River Park, the Esplanade, all under some type of construction. And my experience from being part of Pier 35 is that there's a budget, but it doesn't necessarily translate into proper payment. So I'll give you an example. One of the swings was missing from Pier 35 for over a year and a half because parks didn't have the staff to lift it back up and put it in place. There are other issues. There's a funding source for the Esplanade in Pier 35, but parks has to run by its own budget. So there's no gardener for the Esplanade, even though there's funding because they can't, they're in a hiring freeze. So we're looking for ways to be creative and take care of our own waterfront and look for a model that will involve everyone so that we can have proper maintenance and stewardship for our waterfront. But I started it off by saying that this is going to take time. It's not something that's going to happen overnight. There's a lot of engagement that has to happen. This is the first conversation. We want to talk about how this, the models may work or what people think, or if this is something we shouldn't do, or, something else we should do.
I think maybe a good place to ground ourselves to just open it up to conversation is to start kind of where we began with this, is to kind of think about what the value of this proposition is. I don't know if you all agree, but I think I would pose that given everything we've digested right now.
Can I ask a question? And I'm sorry that again, I was late. I just couldn't get out of work on time. I'm gonna sidestep what level of community engagement went into this meeting here, which is from the neighborhood perspective, is very minimal. But I don't understand what gave birth to whatever this conversation is. And I'm curious because with the exception of what I saw for the Red Hook Conservancy, is it just because we're all along the water's edge? Like what would, and it's a provocative question meant to elicit, like, what is the benefit? Because, for example, what I don't see here is, any of the NYCHA representations. And I know I told Aissa about this, he wasn't aware of it, but he couldn't make it. And they're central over there at Smith between community boards 1 and 3. But what is the benefit of those of us who are here, because I always understood, because I was doing the stewardship model with Rebuild by Design. And I understood that was talking more specifically about East River Park. But this is a very ambitious, what I understand now is like the whole water edge, and where does it begin and end? Are we talking about now involving up to the West Village? And like, I'm just not, is it because there's waterfront construction going on the federal level, on the city level? Like, what's the connectivity as to why, because fledgling is Pier 42. And we've been involved in that for over a year, and we're gonna be more public about that, but like, we are gonna have our own set of goals. What is the sell for why we all come to be united? Because the communities that are on the waterfront that we're talking about are very different. So I don't know what community board one wants in certain areas is gonna match what we would want up in this corner of it. Again, I'm being provocative deliberately to understand what is going on behind this, because it's an interesting idea, but what is the benefit?
Yeah, these are all great questions. Maybe we can break them down a little bit more. But before you came here, I was trying to preface the conversation a little bit about, like, yes, not everybody is gonna be at the table at every step of any kind of engagement process. We'll obviously make every effort to, but this was an idea that came out of our Parks Committee because the community boards are a voice in planning. And so we just agreed to have an initial conversation. I don't think this is like any official engagement of anything. I think it was just a way to preempt what will inevitably might happen when ASCR reopens, and then inevitably when BMCR opens.
And then LMCR is involved too, right? So-
Yeah. So I think these are all just kind of like, because the whole waterfront of Lower Manhattan is changing and the one in CB3 is happening first, like that progression sort of makes it such that we are having these early conversations. So that when.
But like, for
Yeah.
example, is coming together gonna benefit in like, additional funding streams, or we were not there quite yet?
I don't
Okay,
think we're.
That would be my ultimate hope, actually.
okay.
Well, Tim, if you could give some background.
I mean, I think for me, I look at things differently because CB1 encompasses 3 out of 4 of our sides are all water. So I've seen many different visions of what happens on the waterfront, from the Battery Conservancy, which manages Battery Park, to the Battery Park City Authority, to the Hudson River Park Trust. And if you come around the east side, you have privatization models by EDC, right? And then you have Howard Hughes, you have some public peers, but what we don't have on the east side that is really well done, I thought on the west side, was a connectivity level. And so if you have something fantastic happening in 42, right, or I'll use the plus pools model, right? We're all fighting to get plus pools. CB1 and 3 are completely aligned on where we wanted to go over in CB3. And that's sort of a surprise for people, in the city. They're like, but CB1's advocating for it to be in CB3. I think because A, we don't have a public pool at all in CB1, 0, not 1. And 2, we want to connect. I don't want to have 1 and 3 because if you use the NYCHA housing, that sits on the edge between both of ours, right? There's so much that divides us, and yet all of the coastline, including the 150, 250 feet that they're going to build out in CB1, should be connected to what we're doing up here. And there should be some kind of a holistic look, so we can have overall fundraising, so you can have programming throughout. And you can maybe take a look and say, wow, you know what? There are other needs that maybe down the future we'd like to plan with. And instead of planning with one voice, we're planning with all of it and doing what the West Side's been able to do. They've been able to make so much progress in the 10 years that I've been on the board. And I look at the East Side and I'm like, we were here before all that. They have more residents there now than they used to, but I look and say, for the communities of 1 and 3, we should have a greater voice of what's going on in the water side. Otherwise, what we will continue to have, if you look at what all the plans are, is you got what you had and everything else is gonna be commercialized, flat straight. And so from the point of the Coast Guard site at the bottom of the battery, actually including all the way up the side, because you've got from Statue Hughes, from Pier A, all the way up to Howard Hughes will be commercial. Then there will be nothing between Pier 17 and over here at 36, really. Even though we keep saying we want the Brooklyn Bridge Beach, we want it to be something that's a great connector that Gail had promised us for years, right? We want plus pools. We want so many things that are really community driven. But who's gonna fund that? The Parks Department? Eek. I mean, we literally have the Art in the Park coordinator said to our Parks Committee, sent a note saying, here's what we're sending you for temporary art. We asked if they could come and present. She said, I'm so sorry, based on budget cuts, I cannot do anything off hours anymore. And I look and I say, okay, I completely understand that, but that makes me very worried about what the future of our waterfronts look like. And we all want to stay here and make the city better. So let's have a voice. It's kind of where I came from.
I think to kind of also get to what Frank was saying a little bit is that this is a very kind of unique community, really, really diverse, right? There's a lot of different levels of need. And so I just think that it would be valuable to like back up. I think that we're all in agreement. We need funding for resources and things. And I think we can get there. Money is both fungible and also difficult to get, but I think if we were to talk about just like, you know, structures, governance, the value of like what a coalition could do, what it would not do, those conversations I think are worth having.
That's kind of where we're coming from, is to find a way to have everybody be unique and be together to maximize the opportunity for growth, right? And not in a way that the city drives because they don't have a budget and they want to push it out, but in a way that has a really strong community voice. I think I look at, we used on CB1, the example what happened for coastal resiliency up here, and I'm sorry to use it that way, that you went through all the exercises only to have the community plan. Sorry, can't do that. Okay, that's a conversation that we remind the city of every single time we have a resiliency conversation, because that's like the ultimate of where we see what's going on. And that's frustrating. It's frustrating for all of us.
Let me just also add that.
Wait, can I let Dan talk? Cause
Sure.
we've been talking and I'd like to include it.
I had an addition to Frank in that I think that we should also invite people from CB6 into this conversation. But I also, along with fundraising and programmatic continuity and physical moving of people to and from the waterfront and along the waterfront continuity, another from my waterfront advocacy experience and my municipal worker experience, it's good to have an entity that where our different community groups can come to and help ease the differences between the different city, state, and federal entities that, I mean, in the case of both I'm most familiar with the trust, the Hudson River Trust and the Bronx River Alliance, and like, when I'm in the Bronx and I'm going anywhere near, whether it be a park or a DOT greenway, like, I know who I can report something to and get, so that's another reason to have, an entity that helps with, the waterfront continuity.
Just wanted to quickly add that I've been, in some form, I've been involved with planning and peer solitude and other peers. I didn't even know you had started the Friends of Peer Group. And most residents don't know there's a border. They don't go down to the Brooklyn Bridge and go, okay, this is CB1 or CB3. They just look at it as a waterfront. They don't see the line that most of us see because we know there's a border. Most people don't know there's a border anymore. I just wanted to add that little portion, because when I first started, I didn't even know what a community board was, much less that they had borders.
So I want to just emphasize Dan's point. I didn't think of it before, but as in my position, I'm working with communities and groups and agencies, and having an organized group there to reach out to talk to engage them, to even engage more people, just makes it much easier to implement and to have good engagement.
And to touch on the whole engagement, this is a conversation. We struggle because we're not an organization. We're just people who got together and said we want to have a discussion on not only how to do outreach, but funding for outreach and who to contact. Because we said, all right, if we talk to a couple of people, they're gonna say, well, why didn't you talk to X, Y, and Z, or why didn't you talk to us? So we said, let's just hold a series of meetings and discussions and have a talk. So this isn't, we're gonna miss some people. The next meeting is gonna miss some people also, but it'll be repetitive. And just to take the pulse of the community, because I've been involved in a lot of planning, and most of the plans are up on the shelf somewhere. And I don't want this to go that direction. It may, but I'd like to see something happen. And we're all here to try and figure out a better way to get funding and maintenance and stewardship for our waterfront.
Perfect thing. I mean, maybe we should be pen and papering saying, everybody saying, oh, well, you know what? Let's make sure we talk to this group and this group and really start to get the groups and people together. This is to have actually this many people in a room, even having a dialogue like this for a community thing. It's a big step, and it's a great step, because then if everybody recommends one or two or three other people and Aisha and everyone else, then we can get next time, 20 people in the room, 30 people in the room, 80 people in the room, and really have a perspective for need.
Yeah, I mean, since I was throwing out my
Yeah, you
initial
brought up-
comments,
Yeah,
I would say, in this little pocket, and I would describe the pocket, let's just say up to like, Grand Street. And, over a couple of blocks, we're not technically considered two bridges, but let's just say the two bridges pocket. And I don't pretend to speak for every leader here, but there's a lot of sensitivity around, equity and who sits at the table. And aside from Trevor, and I don't know everyone here, but I don't know anyone else here who's sitting at the table other than Trevor and myself, who's on the waterfront in this area. And so my point is that there is a lot of distrust that comes with this lack of equity. And my concern is that this is a CB3, CB1 design arena, which, is very simple to contact other leaders about this meeting right tonight. But, I don't, I'm trying to be delicate and dance around the fact that people have a lot of distrust in the decision-making, what comes together to decide on people's behalf. And right now, we're sitting in a pocket of a neighborhood that is lower middle income, where this happens quite often. And I think we just need to be mindful of that. And then, yes, it's correct to say that we'll have more meetings and there'll be more people invited. But, you have to decide on what the focus is at the same time, and what is the buy-in from people, because people are used to over here not being invited into the decision-making processes. And so you're not gonna have that engagement. I mean, it would be kind of dead on arrival. So I don't think I'm saying anything that's kind of newfound for anyone, but I just am highlighting the fact that in this particular area, I think there's just greater sensitivity, because that's what often happens.
Can I say something? I'm new to CB3, and I'm born and raised in the Lower East Side. I live in Two Bridges. Been here all my life, so I understand what you mean. And I've seen the rise of the waterfront. I've seen what it looked like before, and what it could be. So I understand what you mean. I think that's why I joined the community board. I think the problem is going to be is like making the outreach and how to get to the people of the outreach. And how to get some, because it's hard to get people to understand that this is real. Even for me to explain to people that I'm doing it, because it's hard for people to believe that their voice matters. And what they want for the community matters, because we live on the waterfront. I've been here for 9/11. I've been here for Sandy. I've been here when they destroyed the trees. I've been here when they broke down the stuff without us knowing and we protest. So there's a lot of people who've been here that are not transplanted, that they've been in this neighborhood and they understand it. But I also explain to people that if you want to show up, you have to be here to put for the fight. You have to have some kind of accountability. So it's like, it has to be consistency, but you also have to have a way that you have to have someone like me and you and other people to be like, we're here. And we're not gonna allow anybody to not pull the wool over their eyes. And it's gonna be different, and I'm not gonna say it's easy, I never said it is. It's gonna be a slow thing, and I think people want something that's gonna be fast paced, because it's not. Things like this is not fast paced, and people say that they're gonna do something, and then the next day they don't. So I think these conversations are different. I'm here to make sure that they're not gonna be what they say that they're gonna do. But I do want it to be community-based. I like that CB3 and CB1 are together, but I also know living on the waterfront and Basketball City not allowing things to happen when they say that they're gonna do stuff, and now it's not a basketball, and there's Amazon was there and nobody knew what was going on, and we don't get anything from the community. I don't think it's fair. Like, there's buildings happening that we don't know what's going on. I don't think it's fair. So it's like, I understand your frustration, believe me, I really do. I live this community, I understand it. So I see it, so it's not gonna go unfeathered, but it's not gonna go really quickly. So it's like, I just have to convince people, like, if I'm in it, you have to come with me. So it's like, I have to convince people that you came after work, they have to come too. So I think that's part of it too, but it's like, we have to have planning that's gonna be realistic and tangible. And that has to be part of it as well.
Yeah, I appreciate that, and I won't hog the tension for a second, but I just want to piggyback. Because that's what I was getting at, like, well, what's in it for, and it's a crude way of presenting it, but, you know, there's also some truth behind it, like, what's in it for people to engage? And the other thing I think we should be thinking about is, because I deal with it in my pocket a few blocks over, is it's very sad when I went to visit the Bronx River Alliance a number of years ago. I think you were there, Dan, too. And I had read about it and I heard, and, you know, I'm friends with some of the people that still work there. But they have, like, you go further, let's just say further upstream, you go uptown, they have a relationship with their water. We don't. Our relationship with the water is, on the one hand, some of us have very privileged views for not a lot of money, and we know that it's highly desirable. But on the other hand, like, we've been kind of robbed of the cultural relationship of the waterfront. Being on the water is a huge deal.
Yeah.
And there's a lot, you know, you can say on the micro level that, like, you know, clearly a lot of the, you know, Chinese born immigrants understand the water and they're always fishing. You know, and so they have their relationship that's embedded in them. But, you know, the constant challenge that I always face is like, why should we care about it? You know, and I think it's an amazing, I mean, it's an amazing stroke of luck that I got into the affordable housing here, but let's be honest, most people don't live on the waterfront. And most people that do live on the waterfront are in much more expensive, you know, luxury style housing. And they get it because they get their sunset views or whatever else there is. And they have Hudson River Park over there, you know, it's a state run but they have that and it's better funded, et cetera, but I think one of the stratagems has to be, if we are serious, is about how we draw people to understand their relationship to the waterfront. Because it is really unique and can be much more exploited than it is, rather than it's just where there's construction happening, where EDC decides what they want to happen.
I think that's actually part of my whole point. Because I'm like you,
Mhm,
I've been down here pre 9/11, lived through living across the street through 9/11. Evacuated off the water, off the island.
Mhm.
Lived through Sandy, and yes, I was one of the light switches on the west side that still had power, you know, little slivers. I live in one of the slivers and not in a luxury housing building either. But what I see in parts of the west side that makes me want to panic and have this conversation on the east side is we have no say at all with what happens on our coastline.
mhm.
And the opportunities, once I joined the community board and started seeing things that could be done on the west side, who thought that they would get a beach? And I'm sorry, if you go by Gansevoort, I tell everybody, you should go there at least once. I don't care, in the middle of winter, people were sitting with coats on the beach.
They have Barry Diller, but yeah.
But Barry Diller built Little Island,
Yeah.
didn't do
Yeah.
Gansevoort.
That was the
Gansevoort,
Whitney part.
Right.
There was
This is
behind the scenes
community.
conversation.
But
I'm
they're
telling you,
missing-
we're a community.
the Pier 57 and Gansevoort were community-driven
Mhm.
projects, really strongly community-driven. And we're sitting and fighting for plus pools to enliven our waterfront and get people there. We're fighting for the Brooklyn Bridge Beach to connect everything right out there, right? And I'm sitting here saying to myself some days, how are we connecting? We're connected by the water.
Mhm.
People came to live here through the water, through the seaport area.
They used to barbecue, they used to picnic, they
Yeah.
used to run, they used to bike, they used to bring their family. When I used to tell people I live by the water, they used to barbecue.
Yeah.
Like didn't matter what color you were, what race you were, we were a community and we don't have that anymore. And I think that's what will connect us back. And if we can bring that, that's what makes us the Lower East Side, the Lower East Side. And that's what makes us unique with our art, with our music, and that's what makes us different than the West Side, the Bronx. I mean, I think if you lived here, you understand it. That's what makes us different, and I think we have that.
Our water.
Yes.
Because I'm not paying $75 to go see a balloon exhibit
No.
on the waterfront.
No.
I actually would like to go sit on my waterfront
Mhm.
and picnic on
Yes.
my waterfront.
And barbecue.
You wanna pay your $75, absolutely, that's be great for the Instagrammers and the tourists and
Mhm.
everything. There should be something for everything. But the community doesn't seem like we're getting what we need. The decisions seem to, and that's why, yeah, it has to be everybody from the community, everybody, but if we don't start saying anything, I just can't. I'm worried, honestly. It's a worry point that the city will do what they can to negotiate with individuals. So here's what you're gonna get at 42. Don't worry, this is what you're gonna get over here. And this is what you're gonna get over here for 15 and 16. Well, what about in the middle? Oh, well, you're gonna get a bike lane. But where's my park space?
I mean, to piggyback on to what you're saying, I mean, the elephant in the room is that EDC controls the waterfront.
Mhm.
They're just that simple, and you've all seen all the silly different coastal resiliency schemes that they have imposed upon, where they basically pick off neighborhood by neighborhood by neighborhood. You know, go up between 18th and 23rd Street, you see these 8-foot walls now to protect. And so this is an alternative to letting EDC dictate the future. Because we have, we know people at EDC, and we know that the next thing they're gonna come up with is what they think governance should be. So that's another reason why we're here today. And I think that it's really important to point out that And I'm just giving you my Hudson River example just because I was part of the formation of that park. We had all different strata of demographics going from Chambers Street up to 59th Street and including NYCHA projects. And, you know, we all got together and we had a vision and we stuck to that vision and we talked with one voice, spoke with one voice. And it took a while to organize it, absolutely. But once we had it organized, you know, we had something that was coherent. And, you know, the idea of master planning that I guess Tammy has alluded to, you know, if we have we're proposing right now a Seaport Recreation Center, for example, just north of Tidwell. You know, Ward 3 should be able to use that just as much as Ward 1 should use it. And, you know, there are lots of things that will happen in Ward 3 that Ward 1 is gonna want. So the idea is really holistic master planning, speaking with one voice, and, you know, the word you see is the, you know, the second word in there is development. So you really want to get away from that on the waterfront, and that's what happened basically on the west side. And they had a couple of development zones or whatever, but basically, you know, they avoided housing on the waterfront.
Let me just also piggyback off that, is that my fear, and after talking to Tammy about including CB1, but my fear was that they would end at CB. And that because they have the development and the business there, they have an economic driver that they can look to. Once you get above the Brooklyn Bridge, all the way down, the perception of Pier 36, Basketball City, and the tourist boats, that we don't have an economic driver involved. So my fear was being left out. And that was my push to get this, you know, to have a conversation about that. The other thing we have, and you touched on this and Frank touched on this, is you're right, we do have pockets. We have pockets here, pockets there. Everyone has their little fiefdoms or fiefdoms. And that's problematic in CB3. I don't really know if it's as problematic in CB1, but we have that issue here of who's going to run what, and who's going to do what. It's very difficult for us to coalesce and come together as people. And no matter what happens, you're going to get some criticism. People are going to say, well, I wasn't invited, or it was on a Wednesday, or I had to, you know, I had childcare. But I had to find a way to get this room. Tammy had to slap these owls down from CB1 office here. I had to, that projector broke, so I had to get this battery operated one for a little screen here. This room has not really been used since the pandemic. So it's the beginning, and I know everything is not going to be perfect, but we want to start. We want to try and see if we can get everyone together. So it's just the beginning. We're going to miss folks. It's just the way it is, but there is no budget for this particular meeting at all. It's just us.
And it's about, if I'd consider it a success if every single person left this room and told at least 2 people. So the next time other people come, and if we ran the same slides and added 1 or 2, and that was the next meeting and the next meeting and the next meeting, it's like the old Breck commercials, right? You tell 2 people, you tell 2 people, because I think we have all the economic drivers and no public space, free public space. It's kind of petrifying, but they're gonna build, they tell me, some free public space down by us. If the FDR comes down, what happens there? What happens then? Where does that go on the roads, and how does that affect our waterfront? Does it make it easier or harder to get there? And the community should be the ones, in my personal opinion, to have a huge voice in that say. Because this is us.
Okay, and then Diane, so I was just gonna ask, do we have people on the Zoom?
We had 3, we are now down to 1.
Okay. Just wondering if anybody on the Zoom is from maybe further north, has a perspective from other, you know, parts of the waterfront, or.
They did not
wanted to say
put anything in the chat, and then they cut out.
Okay. Okay.
I wanted to go back to what you were saying, because I run a coalition. It's in a very diverse park. It's a very low income park. It's a official New York City environmental justice area. people are constantly being pitted against one another. And, what I think you talked about is what everybody would have to do, which is, we go into the park and we ask people and we table. And there's a section, Waimea Bird Sanctuary, where I brought interpreters so that I make sure I understand what they wanted. And I think not everybody can come into this room. People work nights, people have children, people aren't, but their voice, needs to be here and can be here. But it means that, similar to what you're saying, you go out and you either ask more people to come, or for the people who can't, you ask them, what do you want to see? And especially where you can be divided and conquered, because what you're talking about is that old fashioned idea of the commons, that we're losing the commons. The commons was the place that was owned by the people. And it's gonna get carved up, and I'm in a park that nobody really wants to be around. So that saved us for a while, but more stuff will come and more people will want to, but I think, you live on the waterfront, you're absolutely right, you have this beautiful thing. And it should be yours, and you should be deciding more of it. You won't be able to decide everything, it's a public park too. The public has a right to, they own public things, but yeah, I think you're spot on. It's just asking people, what do you want to see, even if they can't get here, and they may not be able to get here.
I think that's a great idea, and my mind keeps going back to some of engagement that the Fourth Arts Blocks does, just because this through line between community and culture sort of keeps popping up in my mind about the future of the waterfront. And I love the idea of a survey, or just maybe more in the field kind of things where people just drop in, maybe in some of our gardens. Just trying to think of inventive ways to engage people that isn't just sitting around a table sort of thing. Not that that's unproductive either. But I don't know. I think that maybe we can talk a little bit more about the engagement piece, because that is a hard part too, right? It's the part we all know we need to do, but don't always have the time of day or capacities or people or volunteers and if there's buy-in between all of us, like Tammy was saying, if we want to just add 2 more people for another meeting, or I don't know, I just wanted to kind of popcorn those ideas a little bit.
A few years ago, pre-COVID, we did a survey for the same reason. We're looking at what kind of zoning for economic development we wanted in East Village. Made up cards, short survey cards. People went to family days, they went to gardens, exactly what you said, and we have hundreds, absolutely hundreds of responses.
How many of you, have attended the workshops or whatever that have come out of DOT, for example, when they talked about, how they were going to mitigate in this area, VFDR Drive, and how many people thought that that was a worthwhile activity? Or coastal resiliency. How many people went to those coastal resiliency workshops?
I went to those, but it wasn't very
And how
entertaining.
many people think their voice was heard?
But I mean, maybe the next stops are Hamilton, Madison, right?
Well, my
And the
point is that the
workhouses
way
and-
government, deals with it is they hire a consultant
Mhm.
and they hire community facilitators and they have a script that the community facilitator does, and they'll give you a whiteboard and you put up your post-it notes and things like that, and.
You've been heard. So I'll give an example on that. You're reminding me what you're describing something. When they were making bus improvements on Avenue A and Avenue D, they did exactly what you said. The community rose up and went and we flooded the workshops and we made a difference. We made them change their plans because we were strong. So It depends on the administration. Government isn't just government. We're a lot tougher place right now. I think we all can recognize. But it doesn't mean that you can't make a change.
And,
Go ahead.
Sorry, I didn't see everyone.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
and in the past, even around the waterfront, we have, I mean, it was a letdown the way it happened with specifically East River Park, but for those community meetings, like goals would get food and everybody that Frank and you talked about, like, was there and they were, it's, at that time, it did feel like your ideas were being listened to. As well as similarly more community-based efforts around Pier 42 when we first got the money from the feds and the state. It was a coalition of community groups that like got artists to do stuff on the pier and like really allow people to envision on the site what it could be like, and Goals would host their family days there, and Two Bridges Neighborhood Council would do whatever, bring their events to the space so that people were actually both using and giving their ideas about how a community space could be used. And like, that's the biggest letdown, like you said, of those DOT meetings, is that the DOT people there know that they don't want to promise anything because they know that they can't, you feel it more that they're pushing their ideas on there. But, so I'm saying, yes, it is possible, even with the agencies involved, to get community input.
Yeah, and just to give you an example of a meeting I went to recently, I'm sorry.
Michael, give me 1 minute to
Sure.
speak, thank you.
Okay.
When I heard about this, I just thought that it's a tantalizing idea. But it faces two enormous challenges. One is that this community has burnout on this conversation, like serious burnout, PTSD even. People have spent so much time. It's like, how do you, good people are just like, I don't want to talk about this. So how do you overcome that? And then the other thing is the lack of place. Your place where we went to the tennis house. We sat near the tennis center. We said, do you know this is gonna be torn down? No, here's when they're gonna tear it down. We did that work because we go to the place. There's no place to go right now. How do you go to the people who gathered in that community when it's not there? So not to be a total bummer, I'm still here and I still want to do it. And I'm happy to help with the PowerPoint presentation. But it does have to look different. It can't be a top-down thing. I was almost like, I'm afraid of a PowerPoint presentation because people are so used to coming in and looking at slides. It's like, how do we do this in a way that people really,
At the barbecues.
yeah,
It has to be something different.
so, yep,
At
It
the
has to be
barbecues,
something different.
at Pier 42,
yeah.
down here, wherever you can gather.
Mhm.
So that's our summer, right? That's
Right.
basically
It
what
has to be
we're
something different.
committing to do this
We have
summer,
to do
right?
something different. It has to be something that, it has to be something that it can't be slides, it can't be, it has to be something different that we
Yeah.
need something different.
And we need some serious brain power and
Yeah.
some connections to make it happen.
Yeah.
And I'm sorry to interrupt, Michael. You were gonna.
The only point I was trying to make is that, EDC is already sending out the consultants. And, I happened to talk to one of them about the seaport, and they started talking about carbon neutral, and, making it whatever. And I said to them, well, what about the FDR Drive down by the seaport? Oh, no, that's not in the scope of our contract.
Because the FDR drive is state.
Yeah.
That's the problem. You know, just studying things in small segments. And I'm stuck in that.
I think that when you ask me what drives me to have this dialogue and to push it along, is my fear that when I look at what the city thinks the east side coast will be, that is a very top-down and not at all community-driven. I'm picking out paint chips after they've built the house, and that's not the way we want this to go. And the only way that, and I think that the city is really good at picking off community groups. Because they'll talk to you about this little section over here, and then that group will say, okay, we think we're okay. Then they'll come down here and they go, well, oh, yeah, we can probably put barbecue grills on the, you know, little patches of grass in between after you get off the ferries. That's not really a parks. That is pathways to a ferry with a barbecue grill if you want to sit there for some reason. I'm not sure how that works, right? And that was like their way to assuage the community who was complaining that we didn't have public space in the south. So if you pull back from being at all those ESCR alphabet soup meetings and you like pull, like you have all the knowledge and you pull yourself back and you say, oh, well, wait a minute. Where's the community led stuff? That's why, that's what scares me and that's what drives me to want to come here and talk, because it doesn't make a difference to me what pockets there are. Every pocket needs to be there. And every pocket needs to say something, because if not, what you have are continued pockets and a waterfront that EDC has decided what the city wants and the city needs, period.
Let me just add, because we have about 10 minutes, and this is the second meeting this week for me, and tomorrow we have another very long meeting, thanks to Kay, but no, it's gonna be a long meeting, but this long series of meetings. And there's a few people here who haven't spoken, if you want to speak, because I'm really curious if I'm gonna dedicate more time or my summer to this, if we don't think this is something that can work. But, and if you don't want to speak, it's fine. I just want, if you want to say something and introduce yourself.
Now, why are you looking at me?
Oh, because you don't like to speak at all.
No, never. Yeah, hi, I'm new here. I'm sorry I was late. Another one of those meetings. I can chop you by at least 2 meetings so far this week. But I'm Catherine Freed. I live in East River now. I used to be the council person for here. I used to be on Ward 1. And yeah, I'm also on CB3 and Trevor's committee. And let's see, so what would I say? I've kind of been through something like this 3 or 4 times before. And I pretty much agree with what everyone said about it having to be from, you know, from the bottom up, and it's got to be driven from the bottom. Because otherwise, and it has to be a certain amount of strength, because otherwise the top will ignore everything you want and they'll just go ahead and do what they want to. And they particularly tend to do that apparently on the Lower East Side. For those of us who've been involved in the congestion pricing and the East River Park and all of that, you know, it's all top driven. And we do have to all get together and do as much reach out as possible and come up with as much of a plan before we try to go up the ladder. Because if you have a plan and the neighborhood's behind it, votes still count, pressure still counts, and we can sort of force the top to listen to us and do what we want. And whoever said about picking off groups was totally correct, because you're going to have the city and whoever else, or the state, and certainly EDC, coming in and try to make side deals with different not-for-profits and different groups, and if they can get their support, then other people don't want to be in conflict with the group they've always worked with, so it neutralizes a certain area, and then they'll go on to a different area. So my plate's a little full, but I think this is definitely, I mean, I was involved in what happened on the west side. So And in fact, and I've lived here 20 years. But I represented part of this area back in the 90s, and I've been coming over to this area at least since the 80s, so I'm pretty familiar with everything. Not everyone, but a lot of the stuff. And I'm certainly willing to work if we can figure out exactly what we want, and it's gotta be about the community, and it's gotta be what the community wants. And we have to talk about making sure that we're gonna stand solid. And that everybody gets their say and gets to have input. Not everybody's gonna be happy with everything, but that's democracy, that's the way it works. But I mean, as everyone said, the waterfront is a priceless commodity and we should be using it. And the city should make it usable for us, and they should help us, not stand in the way. So, yeah, I have people who are into it. I'm certainly willing to help.
I actually had a question. Thank you for the presentation of this conversation, very helpful, and I really liked listening to everybody's thoughts on this. So in the presentation, you provided like a couple of examples of other organizations that are doing similar things. What really drives the difference between, for example, something where the mayor is appointing the directors? How does that conversation start versus something more organic like in Red Hook?
I can't.
I know
It
what,
depends on who owns the land. So if the state owns the land, they get to call it. If the city owns the land, they get to call it.
and if there's multi-landowners or then you have something that's more of an alliance. That can be, in my perspective, community driven forward, that includes. But doesn't necessarily control, because even Brooklyn Bridge Park is all city, I believe. Whereas Hudson River Park, there are assets within its park that are state-owned, city-owned, and privately owned, actually. Because that was all done prior to.
City and state.
Yep, city and state, it was all done prior to the creation and the formation of the trust. So it's really about just looking and seeing. What other examples exist? I mean, there are examples we didn't use, like. Simply the Battery Park City Authority or Roosevelt Island, because RIOC and BCA are state authorities and do not have local control. And everything that we seem to be talking about around the table is local control.
But also when people form, I don't use the word conservancies, but any type, and I use Kay's coalition. All the government agencies recognize it. It's there, it's strong. They recognize it and they engage with it because it is there, it is formed, and it's a very strong part of the community. It's, sort of proactive. It was there first, so they can't ignore it. It's not that we're asking for permission to form something.
Is that helpful?
Yeah, I guess I'd be curious to know like what initiates that process. I mean, Governor's Island, I can assume, right? But other parts of the city that have something where the mayor is directly appointing people, seems like it would be initiated by the city. What's stopping something similar from happening here, especially once all these projects are completed? Just wanting to know more context around that, but yeah. Thanks.
I mean, I think that's part of. We, meaning us plus everyone else that we tell and get to join, have to be simultaneously thinking about the final entity as well as just getting more information and buy-in from the grassroots. I mean, again, my closest experience is with the Bronx River Alliance, and they had a Bronx working group for 30 or 40 years before it actually became the Alliance. And then they have a nonprofit, but they also have a parks administrator that helps facilitate, and sometimes it's actually the same person in that situation. But then it's a lot of land that's not parks, so it helps to have these community groups or even housing authorities that own the waterfront properties have the buy-in, but so, yeah, so it's, yeah, I mean, it takes planning on both sides.
You can form any group you want. And you don't have to ask anyone's permission. And the fact that you've lived here this long and it's your park, you know, when they say it's my park day. You don't have to have anybody's permission. It's a political move. I think what you're talking about is trying to have political clout. If you organize the waterfront with the housing, with the people here, with various friendlier businesses, schools, I mean, you would have voice. You would have voice.
Can't be a vote.
I can't, people.
I know, I was about to say, I think that's our cue to wrap up. Christina, yes, please. I love
On
you.
a timer.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, I'm just, I guess, really, Dan described it a little bit, really been involved with
I'm gonna
planning
ask
for
you to
the.
speak up because. with that
Yes, no, I'm
company,
screaming
so,
over that. Yeah, you know, when I also saw the title of the meeting, our waterfront, I had to think back at when many moons ago in the 90s, we really fought for Pier 42 and to turn it into something else than what we thought they would do, which I think EDC was really like, we thought they were going to build a hotel or something like commercial on there. And people got together and we changed the course of that. I just also want to bring something up that is probably might be uncomfortable for people, but also a reality is just how this Esper fight just really divided our community. And I think we should also think about that and how to, you know, be realistic, how to bring people together that might have been on different sides of the issues, because I think we're only going to be strong if we are together. And I think that's another huge challenge. I also think what Lauren said, that people are just really burned out, that we don't really have meaningful places anymore to gather, to come together and to get momentum. So I would say we have a lot of obstacles, but we also have something really to fight for. And yeah, I just want to be realistic about what's ahead.
I think that's a great point, and I want to leave with one idea that was also brewing in my mind, that as another through line for all these conversations. And I'm wondering, maybe as a possible future step is like bringing in school communities or youth groups of some kind, just because I think that maybe the young people have been through a lot. They're like, this is something they can look forward to. They might not have the same level of burnout as the adults do. And so I don't know, it might be a way to just like bring a little bit more joy in the process, and it might be something valuable for them. I don't know, we could ask.
And they have a
folks.
different
Yeah.
perspective.
Yeah.
than we do.
Yeah.
They really do. You'd
Yeah.
be surprised at what they, cause I give therapy to middle school, their perspective of what we think is way different than what
Yeah.
our output is, so.
And it's
maybe,
gonna be their waterfront.
Yeah, and it's their future, and what we might think from it is way different of what we, our perspective is, and they're more of the internet and what their vision is way different.
Right.
So we may think it's late, but they may think something totally different. So including them is something might open an alliance that they also may help us with the buy-in. Because they can give us outreach that we may not be able to tap into. So that might.
I also don't want to overburden them completely, so we'll have to be supportive in the process of doing that.
Don't be surprised with them.
Okay.
They're very tricky. They're very good at that. You'll be surprised.
Okay.
We're running close to time.
Yes,
You want to
okay.
talk about the next steps?
Yeah, I was about to say that, yeah, so I'm trying to think of kind of some takeaways we had. If anyone wants to like kind of popcorn them out, I'm happy to write them down and put them in a.
Like, should
email.
we just do this again?
Okay,
in a
that's one
month,
thing,
Or is that too?
in a month, so
I think
like,
we might want to move north next time. I know that most of the stakeholders here live close to this space. And that's great because these voices are now starting a conversation. I know that I live up by the north end of East River Park.
Okay.
I spoke to people, up there, stakeholders who might want to join. That's why I asked who was on Zoom. If they were here, they were only here briefly. And the good news is that at least for the rest of the summer, we do have the north end of East River Park open. And so that might be a good place to do engagement. And to bring some more of those voices into the conversation. So, I think we should consider that.
And when we're talking about the waterfront, are we including the park and the Esplanade? What are we talking about? Because it's just very different.
I'm sorry, Susan, you're saying the waterfront and the Esplanade?
No, park. Are we talking about East River Park and below East River Park,
Yes.
which is EDC?
Yes.
We're talking about. both.
Yes,
Okay.
yes.
String of pearls is the way I kind of think of it, is, you know, you can't break the string, let's try and shoot for the whole thing. If we end up making a bracelet, so be it, but, I mean, shoot high.
You know, I also think maybe we don't all need to be in every conversation ourselves, right? If there is a way that some people, you know, want to break out down here and have some more localized conversations, and then up north, in the middle, I think we could spread our efforts that way.
But you don't want to do too much of that, because you really do want to move as, you know.
Yes, I think you wouldn't want to do it all the time, but at least to get the first conversation started, that might be the way to go. I've been told, by some of the folks that I've been working with up there, that the right thing to do is meet people where they are, talk to them in the park, go to their community meetings, ask for a spot on the agenda, and just say, hey, you know, we have this idea. What do you think? Would you be interested in talking more about this?
So should we throw out a couple potential locations? Like you're saying, in the park itself?
We could do that.
You mean the meeting or out?
Good question. At the park, it's not a great place to have a meeting. I have done that.
Yeah.
You need amplification, you need to shout, it's
And nobody
very
can zoom in.
Nobody can follow what's going on. So, no, I would say for a meeting, you'd probably want to go to community spaces. But for some type of outreach project, just, I don't know, hand out a flyer or a 3-question survey. I think we could do that in the parks that are the spaces that
So
are.
you think we said we agree on a spot for another meeting, and then we all go and do outreach where we can, like, is everybody here, I'm hearing, at least it has some interest in continuing this conversation. So do we then everyone here goes for flyers wherever they?
Let me just raise this, just as a regular person. The outreach portion sounds nice, but right now we're just having a conversation as people.
Right.
Flyers require funding, sources and rooms and people, and we do not have that. And if we did, we'd get criticism for already having it, because they say, why this group is not, who's president of this group? I think the difficulty is us as individuals, we're doing outreach for what? Are we saying, we'd like to know if you gauge your interest in this, or come to a meeting? I think the challenge we're gonna find is it's just regular people in the room talking. How do we get other people when we don't really have resources and we're not a group? Yeah, so, and I don't know the best way to do that.
I wonder if we go back to the conversation and questions that I think we asked before, is it's not necessarily a survey, but when you're doing outreach, it's what would you want to see our waterfront? And who do you think would, you know, do you think that the community should run it? Should there be a community-based organization that runs our waterfront? Or are we okay with the government and the city running it as it has been? It could be that there are people who are thrilled with the way the waterfront is going, and I'm wrong, and I'm really happy for people to tell me so. But I mean, I think those are some of the questions that we should be asking as we go out. And if people in general start saying, I know there's fatigue, trust me, I get the fatigue. It was tiring watching what happens with the East River Park. just like being an observer and being in the room. And this has been tried many times, but I do think this time, in this season, in the next 20 years, is different for many reasons. One, we have all this resiliency stuff happening. So there are a lot more people who see a lot more change. People don't want to make change when they don't see any change. Well, the bulldozers are here, they're running up and down, the bike lanes are here, they're up and down, they're rerouted due to construction. So people, I think, are a lot more aware of our coastline than they were before. And a lot of people, there are people still who remember the tennis courts and the picnic areas and the way it used to be and the trees. So, and the RASA technology can really help us. I think this is actually kind of a great position to be in, even though there are a lot of fatigued people, to have the dialogue again.
So do we have another meeting? I mean, I'm just gonna listen to plenty of experts here, so.
I kind of think you have to, it's not exactly a mission statement, but it's kind of a draft declaration of intent. I mean, I wouldn't understand if I saw a flyer that didn't have something that said, this is a proposal, it's draft, underline draft, draft. But then some of those questions, like, what do you want to see? You know the questions. What do you want to see here? What's your family want? How do you want to use your waterfront? I don't know if you can say, do you want to run the waterfront? Because you may not be able to. Because it's the state and the city, but you can have political clout. That is really different. But what's the offer that you're?
I think one thing too, more than just bringing more people in, maybe every one of us doing like some small homework and like have overarching kind of things we want to accomplish, like focus in more on what the focus in is, what the buy-in is, what are our strategies, like have some conversations within our communities and then come kind of to have a fuller conversation next time. That's something I would propose based on what we've talked about. Okay.
And I would just add this one constituency we haven't even mentioned, which are the people who work in the river. In other words, the maritime community. And they have an interest in this too.
Make it so.
Okay. All right, I will make it so.
So I'm just, but are we, I'm still not sure, because I know what you're saying, but like, I'm limited, and Frank has mentioned some good points, because there are gonna be people who say, well, who started this? Who ran this? Who's saying they should do this? How come they didn't talk to me? So I'm just curious as to what people think is the next step.
That's always gonna happen.
I know it's gonna happen, trust me. In the parks meeting.
It happened today.
It happened today,
We were
yes.
planning on it.
Yes, we were planning on, we understand, but I'm like, so it's nice to have a statement and some, what you're gonna do, but who's the person responsible? I think to a certain extent, even doing the PowerPoint and us organizing it, we really didn't have like a structure or who was running it, because we were all just putting it together, which created some issues on its own because there wasn't anyone leading the process.
You do need a leader.
And it won't be me.
Well, why do we need a leader? Why can't everybody bring a role? I think that's the point of where we're at. Like, if there's all of us around the table,
How about it?
everybody shares a role in it. And everybody says, here are groups that I think we need to talk to. I'm gonna talk to Aisha, I'm gonna talk to Smith Houses. I'm gonna, Hamilton Madison, I'm going here. And having, everybody pick two, pick three, have the discussion and roll it that way, and then come back to here together in the fall. That gives everybody some time.
Ask you to tell us, like, where is CB1 on this?
So CB1 is nigh in the midst of, we're about to have 70% of our west side ripped up by the Battery Park City Authority. They are going to be resilient. And for the east side, we've watched what EDC is doing, and we've been the Post-it group, much like you guys were, putting the Post-it notes up in all the meetings And then when you pull yourself back from the Post-it notes, go away on vacation to some other beautiful place, and you come back and you go, wait a minute. I think I just got picked off. Hang on here. That's not what we said. And you see the next presentation, you realize that you were just a Post-it note. So yes, we feel like there's some feedback and we're 5 years behind you where you have your resiliency being done. We are not funded to break ground yet, but I'm really happy we're not, because we're still fighting over getting a rec center that can connect
Right.
across from 36 down.
But
We,
where are, have you as a group met and decided that you want to work on this sort of thing?
I think we knew that all along.
Yeah, okay, so you don't have to get buy-in, whereas we do.
Yeah.
Right? So
We're getting parkland added to the west side. So we're not there yet because they're building 250 feet to some odd
Right.
amount of quote parkland.
Right.
So that'll be the conversation will be who will manage that. And I felt almost that, and we talked about, well, why are we talking about this? How does this relate to here? And how does that relate to here? And how does that relate to there? And we already had that dialogue of how that all relates. And that's how we ended up in this room, is trying to figure out how to get it all to relate.
Yeah, I would add,
I
we've.
just wanted to say something for a while, and then
Thank you.
And then I'll say my third.
So I hate to keep using K as my all the time, but I think your point from first having something written actually about what is this? What is it that we're, because every call I have gotten about this meeting is, I don't understand what's going on. And I think that is the first thing we need to do, is this is what we're looking at, get it in concrete terms. You know, what do you want to see? How do you think, whatever the
I
questions are?
completely agree, and I think that for some of the people that have been having these conversations, even that was presumptive before coming here and talking, right? We wanted to know that this was something people had an interest in or saw value in.
But now, I mean, as before, we're talking about now going out further.
Absolutely.
We need to say what it is that we're talking about.
And who's starting it?
Yeah, who are we?
And really invite people in to
Yeah.
disagree, you know, I mean,
Yeah.
it's gotta be an open-ended, but if people really don't wanna do this, they shouldn't, you know, and if this group wants to do this,
So let's do this, because I really think we're about, I want to respect everyone's time, and also the fact that I'd like to go have a proper dinner at some point this week. If we could just wrap this up in the next 3 minutes, about the next steps and what we think we should do.
Could somebody put a sign-in sheet together or something? with
See,
those
that's the whole problem.
With
We don't
everybody's
have, you know,
email.
We don't even have to sign
we
it.
don't have- if I got
We
a
have
piece
a
of
sheet of
she
paper.
has a piece of paper.
We have
that.
a recording too of everybody's names who came in.
Right, if we created a group that we all email each other. I mean, I can volunteer to put together a first draft or something.
Well, we want to make sure everyone wants to be on the email list first.
Is everyone okay with that? I think I have all of your emails probably memorized, so. Probably. I just
Okay,
want
that's
to use
it.
so many of your
You have to go
emails.
home now.
I know.
So what I'm hearing is like a mission statement or something like that.
Draft.
I'll give it to
I can put a
my,
draft together
that's my stylist.
and throw at it.
It costs like $8.
It's the next meeting.
No, just internally.
Yeah,
yeah,
yeah, yeah.
that's fine.
Say that, you're full of shit.
So I think we should have another meeting. I mean, I don't know if we want to look at a date right now. We don't have to choose a location, but I think we should have another meeting. And probably this summer. I mean, otherwise we're gonna lose some of this momentum and
Is around this time next month work? We can
kinda
go
makes
pull it out, yeah.
If we're road showing, if I'm road showing owls, you just need to be on a date and we'll figure it out for you, no problem.
We should definitely do it.
we're gonna
before
buy you
August,
used out.
Yeah,
Right, because
right.
once community,
So it sounds like that's part of a board chair responsibility now, hearing
Oh,
about that.
please.
I'm gonna have a little, okay,
Well, let me ask a question.
get a little package for
And I'm Jerry, maybe this is directed to you now.
that. Yeah.
And I'm getting the sense that maybe everyone here is on the community board. Is this a
No.
community, all right, how many people are on the community boards? So that's almost Okay, so that's aside from a few people, is this a community board led initiative?
It's just, it is sponsored by Community Board 3, but yeah, it's not something that we've initiated, it's just a meeting we're
The
having.
discussion.
Yeah,
Yeah, we've never voted to do this.
The idea to have a discussion. And where do you start it? Is where the community board led was, not the initiative in terms of the organization or anything, but where and how do you start to have a discussion? And the question that we thought, well, you know, you have a discussion at a parks committee, and if the parks committee was like, yeah, no, this isn't at all what we're interested in, then maybe that's dead in the water. But if there's any remote interest, then you go and you talk to, you know, you try and get many people in, because we're all supposed to be public meetings, so everybody and anybody should be able to come, including EDC or Parks Department or PEPs or anybody to tell you.
This isn't a community board meeting.
Let me also add, Frank, that
Sponsors.
Well, the reason why I'm saying that too is because I have 4 phone calls to make right after this, and people are calling me in this neighborhood wanting to know what is going on with this, so I'm asking to just be able to explain it.
So
We hosted.
My answer is, it's about finding a solution. They need to be part of it. It's not,
I think you're gonna have to wait for the draft statement and people to
Yeah.
agree to that before you send
Yeah.
anything out. Or before you characterize it, because
Yeah.
I think that
Yeah.
it's a little tricky, and I'm not here as a community board member, just that way.
Maybe you should say it's about whatever you want it to be about.
we're trying to find the direction of what
Let
it
them
is.
know it's open-ended and we're just starting and we need their input.
Frank,
Yeah.
let me also add that the initial request is to see, was to see if we could do this at the Parks Committee meeting. And I did not want that because I said there needs to be a ton of outreach before we bring this
Yeah.
to the vote at the committee. So the struggle was, how do we do that? And who's facilitating and where and what? So I said, before it even gets to the committee level, we need to have a discussion to see if this is even something people are interested
You're an ad hoc committee. That's what you are. You're ad hoc. Yeah, you are.
But in doubt,
Yes, you are.
in doubt, blame me.
Trevor himself.
In doubt, always blame me.
I mean,
It's really about trying to figure out desire, I think. Because you can't really make a plan until you have people say, we need a plan. And some people say, we don't need a plan, but I don't know, from reading everything from where we sit. I can't imagine that we don't, but I'd be happy to be wrong. And I.
maybe that's our next title of a meeting. Do
I
we
could
need a
be
plan?
wrong.
Do we need a plan?
No, I could
So-
be wrong.
Are we gonna doodle the date or are we gonna email the date? Are we gonna doodle the date? Can we pick now or should we just,
Let's doodle the date.
Yeah,
so the thing
Because you're
is,
gonna have to doodle a
who's
place.
gonna do that?
Yeah.
Because it's gotta be along the waterfront. It's
Wait a
gotta be
minute, you just
somewhere.
had an offer.
So are we?
So are you the temporary chair?
well, yeah, I'm the facilitator, we're not doing
Oh,
chairs,
facilitator,
and this is an effective spokes
This is-
council.
I wanted to call you the boss.
No, I think
You're the boss
that,
of me.
I'm gonna call you a committee
But-
now, don't worry.
I think I'm with Andrea, and there's no boss. It
Yeah.
really is
I-
round, it's a round
that's very
table
important.
of interested
totally
people in the
want that.
community. That's where it starts.
Christine, you were trying to say.
Yeah, I'm just, we could doodle or whatever, have another meeting, but what are we going to do? Are we committed to bringing people to the next meeting?
I think
Yeah.
what we need is to make a draft permission statement that we all agree on.
Yeah.
And then we can then circulate that verbally or by email or however we choose to try to encourage people to get to the next.
So we're going to do that draft like within the next 2 weeks?
Yeah,
And then we're going to recruit more people?
yes,
To come to the next meeting?
correct.
Okay, just want to make sure what we're doing next.
Yeah,
I hear you. That's why I'm here. I'm good at logistics.
Me too.
I want your.
How about Sarina?
I'm here for tech and to beg to stay
Sorry.
connected down for us, because
no.
I really believe the larger voice will help benefit all of
I
us.
appreciate your leadership.
And
Johnny, I
especially
really do.
the dead zone, which is what I call south of 36 to get
Yeah.
to 17. It petrifies me because I know the opportunities that are there. And I'm not seeing a lot of. I haven't
So-
seen Mud Breach, I haven't seen the pool, I haven't seen picnic areas. I have nothing like we used to have with the tennis courts when I first moved down here. I mean, like, I want the waterfront back for the people. more than just transit.
So
And
can I,
tourists.
oh, sorry, can I ask a question? If there was a PowerPoint before, can we put it online and invite people to see it?
We recorded this whole,
Okay.
with the owls, so we can also share with our people that are asking us what this is.
Yeah, we can send,
on
we can send
TV3.
the link.
Okay.
We're gonna put it on our website,
see.
but we can also send the link around to this group.
Yeah, because it'll be picked up on social media if we put it out and people will look at it and they'll get a better
You
idea
can
about
also
what we're
send the
dealing with.
PowerPoint around and make
Yeah,
sure
I
that you
don't
guys
know.
want to this group.
No, but it's not the.
I think it's fine. I just said, I don't think.
No.
My question before you're asking, can you have the PowerPoint? We absolutely could circulate it to this group if people are interested in doing that, but we don't feel like that represents us. That doesn't represent this group. That represents what the people who are trying to figure out how to do this brought to this group, right? So it's not like a
It's a
presentation.
tool.
Right.
It's premature.
It's
So in that
premature.
case.
It's just a conversation starter.
Yeah,
But I
exactly.
mean,
I don't think it's a
work with
recruitment
it
tool,
and.
No,
You guys wanna see it though? Do you, I mean,
It's on the recording.
It's on,
yeah.
it's on the.
Which
If
I
you
would
don't
never
wanna-
ever
if
want.
you'd rather just flip through the slides, I don't have any objection to send the slides around too. If that would be
Oh, did
helpful.
you do it? Oh, okay.
send it.
As well, work.
Diane and Mike.
Okay, thank you all.
All right, so
It's obvious if you put it out there.
It's a mishmash of everything.
You get to close.
No.
You're all really good.
Right, so for meeting purposes, we're gonna adjourn this because we're also on filming this and this will become history, so hopefully. So we're gonna adjourn the meeting now. You can end the recording.